Welcome to part 2 of 2 of an introduction to That's Not a Capital Ship, Naval Gunfire Support. That's just not a capital ship, Naval Gunfire Support. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Oh. No. Naval Gunfire Support is often provided by ships which are not in any way, shape, or form capital ships. Although this, of course, gets very interesting when you get into the modern world because, we don't really have the battleship. We don't have the battleships anymore. We don't really have any cruisers. So, do we really consider destroyers and frigates to be not capital ships? They're the biggest guns available. Ooh. Right, let's get into this. Right, and there we go. And we start. Right, and did you really expect me to come across World War II, which, by the way, is basically my ballywhack of naval history is 1880 onwards. Although I have spent a lot of time in my life teaching galley warfare and all sorts of things, so I've taught it all. But when it comes to producing research papers, I've got some produced on pre-dreadnoughts, some on dreadnoughts, a lot on the interwar period, a fair number on World War II, post-World War II, 1950s, 1980s, and modern stuff. So, when it comes to sort of research, stuff I've actually researched and done and I've got really, really close to my fingertips, this is right in my area. And it's tribal class destroyers, and it's Operation Claymore. Now, Operation Claymore is really, really cool. Operation Claymore basically is the first proper amphibious commando operation ever really conducted under modern weapons, modern circumstances. It's kind of like the 10th destroyer flotilla. The Royal Navy could have picked anything they wanted. They could have picked any destroyers, any ships they wanted for this operation, and it would have been granted to them. Anything they wanted would have been gone because this commando operation had to be a success. This was going to set the tone for the whole war as far as they're concerned. They pick 4 tribal class destroyers, an L class AA destroyer, HMS Legion, and 2 landing ship mediums. And they go to it. The landing ship mediums are chosen because they carry the more advanced, larger landing craft, the LCMs. And they just go, and they do absolutely so much damage to the poor German war effort in Norway. It's just cruel, and they nick so much, and they go away with so much. Lofoten Islands are just not the same after they've been there. Not for the Germans, anyway. They feel terribly exposed, terribly unprepared, terribly wondering when the next tribal is going to hove into view. It's really a very interesting operation, and like the video I muse about doing on galley warfare at some point, it's worthy of a video itself. I'm probably going to discuss it a fair amount when I'm talking in the Tribals, Battles, and Darings video in July. Claymore is just good. But for that one, it was felt sort of a bit half-hearted for the Tribals because, they still had commandos with them. And, they still were using other people for the land operations. And really, it's HMS Nubian in Linosa, which goes full-on tribal. Full tribal. They are conducting operations to clear the small islands in the Mediterranean. And it is decided that a particular island could be dealt with by just one tribal class destroyer. Specifically, one tribal class destroyer. They have the choice. They could have sent a cruiser. They could have sent other ships. No. They're not needed. One tribal destroyer. Any troops? No. The crew will do. Oh. When they arrived and did their tour around the island, the Italian garrison started already surrendering as they were just touring around the island and they barely started firing. They then had to go ashore and find a commander who wasn't where he was supposed to be. He then tried to negotiate from a position of strength, and they basically said, "Your garrison is already aboard our ship and has surrendered. Do you feel like surrendering now, or do you want to play?" But yes, HMS Nubian, carrying out an operation which would have been de rigueur in the age of Nelson and Napoleon and all that period. A single small ship takes over an entire island. We salute you, Nubian. By the way, as a tribal class destroyer and as a ship, she is second only to HMS Warspite in war honors. And that's largely because of the way they're counted for destroyers and these sort of ships versus battleships. Battleship actually turns up, it's considered a battle. A destroyer just has a fight, it's considered part of a campaign. Just so cruel. So cruel. Right. I have now, for everyone's reference, set the timing to 8 minutes per slide. So my aim is I should get them done before 8 minutes is up. Here was you thinking that the tribals were going to be over. No, it's Korea now. It's Korea. And for many operations, there were cruisers still available, so the cruisers were used, and the cruisers were lovely. But when you wanted to hunt the trains down, when they were trying to carry their load and do their logistics duty, when those trains were just trying to trundle around their day, puffing away, there was HMS Haida, HMCS Haida, tracking them down. Actually, on the first occasion, the engine managed to get away. She destroyed the train, but not the engine. That seems to have annoyed her and her crew something chronic, really. It becomes almost a savant-like gift they have for finding the engine. They're no longer bothered so much about destroying the train. They'll do that once the engines stop, but from that point onwards, the first round, if they the worst, the second round will go through the engine. The engine will be Haidas. That ship really should be painted with, well, definitely a few German destroyers and torpedo boats on her, but also many North Korean steam engines. Many North Korean steam engines. They are such beautiful ships. And she's in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. And I'm in lockdown. Also don't have the money, but I'm in lockdown. We're all can't go anywhere. There's no chance of me getting to it. Admittedly, you don't have the money, but it's normally what summer school's for. Teaching and that gives you the money for your research trip. She's beautiful. Look at those lines. That is a ship which has presence. It's something I go on a lot of I know about with things, but some ships can be bigger than a tribal, or bigger than other ships, and they still won't have half as much presence as some small ships. Presence is as much about the way a ship looks as how big it is. It's about how a ship is maintained, about how a ship is kept, as much as how big it is. Size alone does not give a ship presence. Think about that with humans. Sometimes the biggest people do not have half the presence of the small people who walk into a room. That's the same with ships. Just because you're big doesn't give you presence. Right. Next slide. Where do we go after Korea? Where do we go after Korea? Well, honestly, I was tempted to do the Suez Crisis and various other things, but I didn't want to spend half my life dealing with the fallout in the comment section. So I thought I'd deal with half my life dealing with the fallout in the comment section of this Falklands War. First things first. It was Argentine propaganda which reported that HMS Invincible sunk, not the newspapers. Although some newspapers did repeat it, they usually many of them also repeated the information from the Royal Navy and British government about her not being sunk. So it's fun times. The fact that some people still to this day seem to believe it is more worrying, but we'll leave that to one side. So the Battle of Goose Green, famous. It is a very interesting battle in terms of the turning of public perception, perhaps, of what's going on. Because up to that point, you're losing ships and you're building up stuff ashore and all these things. You're doing all the important stuff, but there's nothing really positive hitting the headlines for a while. You've landed in the Falklands, you've retaken the other islands, you've done all the stuff, but you haven't really got good news coming. Goose Green is good. HMS Arrow, a very cheap Amazon class frigate, fires the shots which start there. And then you got Tumbledown, again supported by Yarmouth, and Active, two other cheap frigates. You can probably guess what I'm about to say here. We have the Type 31s coming through, and I'm quite impressed with their gun armament. They are certainly sloops. They've got 57mm, 40mm. That's good. I'm worried about them. I don't think they're ever going to be able to use this fire support, so for naval gunfire support. So that's going to mean more pressure on Type 26s and Type 45s in terms of any amphibious operations. Because as much as I love the 57mm, I don't think you can really use it for naval fire support. I would also point out that Yarmouth, so you look at top right. She's got a double 4.5-inch gun, and that is the same mount, Mark 6 mount, which was fitted on the Daring class 1949 ships. Which is why I say that, frankly, they could have done with a few of those wandering around in the Falklands, because they would have had 3 double guns with more ammunition on each one of them. The Falklands is a naval war, very much so, and naval gunfire support is critical. A single gun can, thanks to the rate of fire and various other measures, equivalent to basically half a battery. So sort of about 4 105mm light guns when it comes to terms of firepower. I seem to remember that's the equivalent given. When you have a double gun system like Yarmouth has, that's equivalent to, actually considered equivalent to 10 light guns. Okay, so a little bit more than a battery. So in that way, you could say that at the Battle of Tumbledown, they have the fire support equivalent of 14 guns, which is more than 2 6-gun batteries. almost as much as 2 Cold War British Army of the Rhine standard batteries, which were usually 8 guns. That's a lot of firepower. Even for Goose Green, that is HMS Arrow is a critical amount of firepower. In fact, possibly the thing they could have done best to help out with Goose Green would have been if they managed to find, if they realized the sheer number of opposition that was actually there, they would have probably sent maybe more ground troops, but certainly another frigate would have got detached to go along with Arrow to provide a little bit more oomph to the fire support. Because that thing is, these are batteries which are self-propelled, carry their ammunition, everything with them. You know, they're great. And that's what they do. They give you a lot of options. But you have to have the guns for an option. I can understand why we've gone for single guns in single mounts. Engineering-wise, it's easier to maintain. Myself, I would, I actually had this conversation with a very, very switched-on naval officer. Must be almost a year ago. And we were talking about it, and he basically said, when explaining the Type 31s, he'd prefer the multiple single mounts because then if something goes wrong, it goes wrong in one of them. My con was I would prefer the same amount of mounts, but I would like to have double guns in each of them because then you usually have, if one gun goes wrong, you still have the other gun firing in the mount, so the mount's not particularly useful. It's not that much more technologically difficult to put in. It is a little bit tighter in terms of space, but it is not that much more technologically problematic. And it gives you a huge increase in firepower, i.e. Yarmouth versus active. I also think if you're not got a 4.5 inch, in case you do end up having to provide fire support for troops for some reason, and you can never rule it out, it would be very nice to have a double 57mm rather than a single. Mainly from the perspective of making the person the other side of it keep their head down and go, yowza, that's a lot of noise. Because that is part of what artillery is. Just as with air defense, I think I mentioned part of air defense in wartime is literally just driving the planes off. It's scaring them or making them drink and get out of the way. With naval gunfire support, a large part of it is providing so much noise, so much coverage that the enemy thinks it's just not good. And here's a classic example of it. Oh, and by the way, please notice, all these ships come after the Falklands War. What have they all got? 4.5-inch guns fitted. The first 2 batches of HMS Chatham's class, Type 22s, don't. I have Boxer sitting up there and up there behind me. I'm not sure if you can see Boxer. Let me lift you up. As you can see, Boxer has no gun fitted. That's the Type 22s, because they are missile ships. They are ships designed for the North Atlantic fight against the Soviet Navy. They have a very good air defense missile, and they are very good at anti-submarine warfare. They are exactly what you need for that, but they're not good for fighting inshore, really, and they haven't got the gun to provide fire support. Chatham has the gun to provide fire support. So does Marlborough, so does Richmond. Interesting enough, only one of those ships is still in service with the Royal Navy. HMS Richmond. Marlborough's in service with the Chileans. And I can't remember who Chatham's in service with. Let me just check. Oh, no, she was scrapped in Turkey. I thought she'd gone on to serve with someone else. She's a very good ship. Why is she, Look, I'm going to get in trouble again for this, but I do still think, and I would argue always, that we should have sold Type 22s to Chile and should have kept the Type 23s, because operating 16 versus 13 is not that much more expensive. Especially not when you're dealing with the crewing and the manning and the maintenance and the refit. And actually, those extra 3 ships, if you consider with the current Royal Navy, would be very, very useful. And I do accept that this last video has been incredibly Anglo-centric. I will look up other examples, but when I'm looking for major wars of naval gunfire support in recent years, AL4 is the second Gulf War, and it's a Royal Navy operation. It's a British operation. That's the 3 ships which provide the gunfire support. The Falklands, World War II and Korea, admittedly, is on me, but those are travel destroyers. I'm sorry, that doesn't count. And Hyder's Canadian. All right, then. Again, we have the themes coming up for July. So we have back pocket cruisers, the one I'll be talking about, as I said, a lot more about Operation Claymore, probably. Flying boats and seaplanes. What would you put in warehouses at the end of World War I for World War II if you were in command, and why? Ooh. I wonder if I could stick a whole battleship in a warehouse. It would have to be a big warehouse. There are so many options for that one on the 6th of July. Some more admirals, engineers, and historians. As I said, I'm going for some Japanese. I'm going for some American, some French, some Russian. I'm going to try a bit of a mixture. Naval diplomacy, more than just a tale of empire and gunboats. Yep, I'm going to look at some. I am nicking stuff from Cable and this book. Soviet Naval Diplomacy by Dismukes and McConnell. Or edited by Dismukes and McConnell. And it's cool. It's very, very cool. And I've had it for a few years. And what they get up to. It's worthwhile looking into. But also, basically I'm doing that because one of the admirals, of course, I'm going to look at in some more admirals is Gorshkov. Of course you're going to look at Gorshkov. Who wouldn't look at Gorshkov? Then we have From the Sea, Korea-Indonesian confrontation. That one seems the least fleshed out, but basically I'm looking at how naval power supports land operations. I think I'm probably going to add another 3rd one into that, but I'm not sure which one yet. And Tuesday, 28th of July, making Mare Nostrum a hollow jest, Iron Submarines in training. Hopefully my submarine books, my new ones, arrive before then. Hopefully. And Thursday, 30th of July, pre-tribals, the Iron Destroyer Force before the tribals. You can tell which ones came up by me. Then can't you? Literally. There are pretty much 3 which are in there from me. 2 are, of course, from the questions on YouTube and Twitter. 2 are from the Discord's collection, and 2, as I highlighted, are Patron ones. Courtesy of InHappy and the CIA. And just to testify, this is the votes that were cast. 21 out of 29 patrons. So if there were more patrons, who knows how the votes were going. If the other 8 patrons had voted, who knows. But honestly, those were 5 good questions, and I wouldn't be surprised if many of my patrons who are lovers of naval history, as much as I am, were basically going, I don't mind which of those gets done. In fact, I'd like all of them to be done. See, I had a mental bet, and I'm not surprised the CIA one got good, because that was my number 2. But I mentally, I'd thought was going to be number 2. I thought Brad's the politics of Anglo-German naval race was going to come number 1. I just had that feeling, and it didn't. It came in at number 3. Really quite surprised. At one point, Brad's and the 2 InHappy ones were all in second place. The CIA's Indian Ocean from 1941 to 43 was at the front the whole way through. Most, but well, no, Brad's started off and being in front, and then quickly InHappy, then InHappy was in front, and then from basically halfway through day 2, it was the CIA in front the rest of the time. It was just great to watch. There was some really cool history being discussed. Interesting comments underneath as well. Oh, next slide. Where else to find me? Well, where else to find me? I'm on Twitter at AC_Naval History. I've got Patron, as mentioned, and Global Maritime History, where I am the ship research editor, and I love it. Sam and the rest of the team are an excellent bunch to work with. They do some really cool stuff, and it's basically it's all put together as maritime history, loosely conceived. So as long as you can claim something sort of maritime related, they'll put it in there. There's a history of sea shanties on there. Now that is cool. There's also some stuff about cruisers and Tsingtao in 1939 and tribal class destroyers. I'm not sure who wrote that stuff, but you know, there's all sorts of interesting stuff on there. Take care. Have a nice day, and see you in a bit. This will probably not go up too long before the actual video. Thank you to all my patrons. Thank you to all my subscribers. Thank you to all the people who've pre-ordered my book. Thank you to all the watchers. Thank you to all the people who comment. Thank you to everyone. Okay, have a nice day. See you soon.